Hi, everybody. So this week we had a series of head of school huddles where a lot of our families were able to join us for a discussion about our planning for 2020-21. We know there's a lot of families who weren't able to join us, and so we wanted to record a clean version of the presentation so you could hear and see some of the content about what we're planning for next year. What'll be missing is the active dialogue and the active conversation. Our huddles ran about 2 hours with great conversation, great questions, and great suggestions. So if seeing this and the content provokes thoughts, questions, comments, drop me an email, check in. We can continue the conversation. We'll also be doing more head of school huddles throughout the summer to continue to keep families updated on what we're thinking. And we'll also be doing head of school huddles all throughout the year next year. During these uncertain times, we think it's really important to stay in close contact with you and also to have the communication be two-way. We'll still be pushing out emails with a lot of important content, and we also want to have ways to dialogue back and forth. So here's what we're going to do. We are having a conversation in 4 parts. This is the way we ran the huddles. The first part we started in with check-ins that I really wanted people to acknowledge something that was positive and good about remote learning. And a lot of great stories were shared about increased family time, more relaxed schedule, not running to 27 million soccer practices and dance practices. And a lot of people said they were so much more in tune with their child's learning, like listening to what their child was talking about with their teacher on a call or seeing the lessons, and that they really valued seeing what was happening in the classroom. And then the second part we shared as a check-in was something that was challenging. We all acknowledged, from myself, I shared that I have a doctorate in education. My wife is nearing a completion of her PhD in human development, and I've been running private schools and teaching for 25 years, and we still are struggling to keep our heads above water. That this has been really challenging for us. Personally, my patience has just not been what it should have been. And so a lot of families have been sharing similar things, that it's hard to find time, it's hard to keep up with everything. And it felt good just to connect as a community and say that, yeah, we're having some shared challenges, even though we're very proud of our kids. And I'm very proud of our faculty and our whole community. So that was the first part. And then the second part, we want to talk about how we are working. I want to give some insight into how our team is working, what's driving our decision, and what processes we're going through. And then the third part was what we are planning. So that's some of the more specific pieces of information of what we're planning for next year so that we can assure that we open in person in a safe and reliable way. And then the fourth part was just kind of a wrap up on how we are going to succeed. And just reflecting on that, we've had great success during this challenge, and that we're going to continue to have a great year next year. I'm very confident in that. So let's get going. And here we go. So this first section is about how we are working. We wanted to share with you that I think we went to remote learning on March 16th. We had a task force that we set up 2 or 3 weeks before that, once COVID-19 started to bear its head and realize it was going to be a thing for our entire world. So our task force is a group of administrators. They included the head of school, the director of human relations, our 2 directors of program, which are the director of upper school and the associate head of school, our director of marketing and development, and our director of finance. So our job was to work at the operational level and take in all of our points of input, and each of those directors represents a different perspective, from the employee perspective, the curriculum perspective, the family perspective, the financial perspective, the operations, and the building site perspective. So, and that group all reported up to the head of the school to make our decisions. And then you see another bubble there called the Board of Trustees. And a board of trustees at a school like ours and all independent schools, they have 3 main jobs. Their first job is to oversee the fiduciary health of the school, that they're fiduciary stewards of the school. They set our tuition, they set our overall budget each year, and they manage our reserves, and they're responsible for the finances of the school. The second thing they do is they employ and support the head of school. So the head of school is the Board of Trustees employee, whereas the other 61 employees of the school are employed and managed by the head of school. And then a third thing that they do is they oversee vision and mission of the school. So they are very in tune with what the policies are and what the direction of the school is, and making sure that their employee, the head of school, is following those policies. So for example, the school has a policy on financial assistance, how it's administered, how it's managed, to whom it's given, and under what process. We varied from that process in the last 2 months because one of our strategies was to do everything we could to support families who experience temporary financial hardship due to COVID-19. So if there was a financial hardship within a family that was threatening their enrollment, we tried to step in and support them, and that included some adjustments to our financial assistance normal policies. The Board of Trustees was involved with that, and that was because that was a diversion from our normal policy. And the Board of Trustees met a little more frequently during this time, and the executive committee was probably in touch with me about every week just to stay closely connected to what was happening during this time. And they've been exceptionally supportive and helping us make our way through this crisis. The third input there is internal legal counsel, that the school has an attorney on staff, and it's been exceptionally valuable during this time because there's been legal implications to a lot of decisions and a lot of things that are coming at us from the state, from the CDC, from the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services. And it's always nice to flush that through a legal lens also, to make sure we're protecting our students, our families, our employees, and the overall business of the school. So those are the three inputs and kind of groups and how we organize ourselves. The next two slides are things that our group, that we kind of worked through our decisions following. So these were some lenses through which we looked. And this first slide is what we call our guiding principles. And then the second slide in a second will be the perspectives we considered. So for the guiding principles, we knew that I guess the way I'd say it is that the ground has been shaky upon which we've been trying to make decisions. Any small business, and that's what we are, we're a small business. We have an operating fund of an operating budget of about $3.9 million, and we employ 61 to 62 employees. So we're a small business. And as a small business, our goal is to make predictions and forecast what's coming down the road so that we can best be prepared for it. We always do that. It's been more challenging during this time because seeing down the bend of the road and what's coming has really been hard. That guidelines are changing, medical models and forecasting are changing. And so as our modeling has shifted, because the base upon which we're building it is not as solid, we wanted to make sure we were being guided by sound principles and sound values. So early on, we came up with these 5 principles to make sure that every decision we make, big or small, is influenced by these 5 principles. So the first principle is safety, that it is of critical importance that we are keeping our community safe. And our community is not just our students, it's also our employees. Some of our employees are in our at-risk category, either due to their particular medical situation or due to their age. And so it's our job to protect them as well, in addition to all of our students. A second category that is a guiding principle for us is our family partnership. And that involves you, the parents, that we've been doing everything we can to stay in close communication with our families, to ask for your help, your partnership, your input. These head of school huddles are a step in that direction. I wish we would have started these head of school huddles 4 or 5 weeks ago. We didn't get to it. We've been pushing as hard as we can on things, but we will be continuing these throughout the summer. A third guiding principle is in-person learning. And while that might seem obvious, the reason we wanted to put that principle as a guiding principle for us is not only to support our children being in school and support our families with the normal structure, but as a Montessori school, we believe in tactile learning. We believe in hands-on learning, multi-age grouping. We believe in children having their curriculum individualized by teachers who observe them. That's how we drive our curriculum, is the teachers observe that, okay, they understood that lesson, now we can push them to another one. And so for us, it's critically important that we do everything we can to stay in-person learning. A fourth principle for us is Montessori learning, that the way some other schools have proposed to manage and navigate this pandemic, some of the things that they've proposed do not align with Montessori values or Montessori pedagogy for us. It's important for us that we don't forget that that's why you chose our school. That's why we chose the school. So Montessori learning is always going to be there as a guiding principle. And then the fifth guiding principle is ongoing monitoring. I mentioned how the ground upon which we've been building our models and our decisions changes so much, we're actively monitoring what the CDC is saying, what Guilford County is saying, what the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services are saying, what our families are saying, because those inputs are changing. And later on, we'll talk about our scenario-based planning, that we don't have one plan we're putting in place. We have multiple plans we're putting in place at the exact same time, because we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we want to be prepared for anything that's going to happen. So ongoing monitoring is an important principle for us. The next slide is talking about the perspectives that we're considering. So in making decisions, there's never any one perspective that's driving the decision uniquely. That is really important for us to take into consideration as many perspectives as we can. And unfortunately, sometimes those perspectives are not in alignment. So you can imagine that sometimes what is best for a parent, for example, might not be best for the employee, or might not be best for the student, or might not be best for the finances of the school. So we're trying to balance that and take care of everybody. So at the bottom of those bullet points there, we want to make sure we're doing what's best for you, our families, for our students, for our employees also. That's what's best for our faculty and staff. And of course, we also have to be careful to do what's best for the finances and the business of the school. The top bullet point there is the medical guidance. That's high on our list for perspectives that we're considering during this time. So our two gold standards for those perspectives are the CDC and the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services. That it's their guidelines that we're very closely watching. It's their guidelines that we'll be implementing this summer as we work towards opening summer camp in July, and this fall as we work towards opening the school for in-person learning in middle of August. So, and we've also got a great group of parents who are physicians or medical advisors of some sort, and they're supporting us and helping us make sense of the guidelines. Sometimes what the CDC or the DHHS writes as guidelines, it's helpful to have someone who knows our community to help make sure we're interpreting those correctly in a way that's responsible and respectful towards all the different perspectives. Of course, we're paying close attention to what the governor says, what the Guilford County says, what Greensboro is saying, so that we're being in alignment of any executive orders, any best practice guidance that's coming from those organizations. Another perspective that we're considering, I think many people might not know we consider, it's other independent schools. So for example, there's a group of about 12 heads of schools in Greensboro. We usually meet about once a month during regular times, maybe once every 2 months. We've probably been meeting about every week during this time, checking in with each other. That the amount of sharing of resources and supports amongst independent schools has really been high during this time. As one specific example, when our school made the decision that we were not ready to safely open summer camp during June, and we made that decision by looking at our guiding principles, all these perspectives, and we ultimately asked, could we safely and feasibly open in June? And the answer was no. During that time, I was also in conversation with the other area independent schools, and I knew that every single other independent school with whom we're in contact made the same decision. So while we don't work towards a groupthink or a herd mentality, it's helpful for us to see what are these other independent schools doing and what is their approach. That's a layer of support for us and a perspective we consider. We're also very closely connected to our North Carolina Association of Independent Schools, as well as our Southern Association of Independent Schools, both of whom we're accredited by. And then the other accrediting body, along with SAIS, which is the Southern Association, is American Montessori School. Those are our two big accrediting bodies, and they've been issuing guidance and support, webinars and memos that we're paying close attention to. So we're trying to manage all of those points of input into our decision-making groups so that we can make the best decisions possible for all of our constituents. As we look at what those perspectives are and what our guiding principles are, it's important to share that the school has been on sound footing to begin this decision, to begin managing through this crisis. So I think I identified 6 points that are worth sharing. Some of these we shared in our earlier head of school huddle, so some of you might know this content already, but I think it's important to share. The first point is sound financial management. So going into this pandemic situation, the school has been managed financially very well. That is due to both our financial directors that we've had, as well as our board of trustees and our finance committee within the board of trustees. So it's always a goal of independent schools to have about 6 months worth of our operating budget available to us in some form or another, and the school has that. And some schools don't have that. Some schools, when this crisis hit, they've been hit hard. Some schools have already folded. That's not in our cards. That's not in our future. Having that sound financial management has allowed us to make the decisions that are best for all those constituents. Where some schools have not had a sound financial base and their decisions have had to be purely financial. Ours have not had to be. We're taking finances, our students, our family, our curriculum, and our faculty into mind at the same time. So that's a really strong advantage that we have. Another strong advantage we have is the depth of our bench, the depth of our faculty and staff. That you know this as parents, how wonderful our faculty and staff are. And some of you have heard me before talk about the Montessori training that they go through. So being accredited by American Montessori Society means that our lead teachers throughout the building need to have their Montessori credentials. And again, some of you have heard me say this before, but the Montessori credentials, they are not a go to a weekend workshop or take a evening class one night a week for a month. It's a serious investment of time and resources. My head of school credential is a 2-year process that includes 5 weeks of residency and costs the school nearly $15,000. And I say that because it's a serious commitment of the school to be sure that we're implementing the Montessori values and curriculum and pedagogy to the highest level possible. So in part because it was what was next, but also connected to the current situation, we have 3 people going to training this summer, which is an incredible investment of time on their part and an investment of resources from the school. So in the primary division, Ashby will be starting her training this summer. Leticia will be starting her training this summer. And Ben will be starting his training this summer. And then finishing up, I'll be finishing my credential this summer. Stacy will be finishing her credential later this summer. And then Gail in primary will be finishing her credential later next fall. So the depth and the skill of our faculty is a big advantage to us. Another advantage we have that some schools don't have is options for flexible space. This will come up with when I start talking about what we're doing, which is going to be shifting our classes into smaller class sizes, which is going to require additional spaces. Some schools do not have that option or that availability. We do. For those of us who have children in the front part of the building, the lower school, you might be thinking, where is he talking about? There's not much space in that building. And there's not. We're close to capacity. We fit great, but there's not a lot of extra space in that building. In the upper school building, we have some space. That's in part because of the way the building's constructed. It's in part because our upper school enrollment is a little bit lower right now. Right before this pandemic started, we've been on this tremendous growth process for our junior high program, that it's been built on this really solid foundation, and the work that the team has been doing. There are incredible things happening in junior high, and the enrollment is really starting to grow, but it's not there yet. So for those of us who have children in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, that what is coming for us when we get to junior high is going to be amazing. And we have the luxury right now, though, that the enrollment is a little bit smaller, so we have a little bit more access to some classrooms. We also have our land campus, which has a 37-acre campus in Oak Ridge. And there's a retreat center there built that is another area for potential classroom usage. So that's another advantage we have, is some flexible space, and also our playground space, I should say our outdoor space. We have that 10-acre campus. That think about how many spaces we have on campus where groups of children can play and learn outside. that a lot of you gave very generously to the Fund for GMS, and the North Beach play area is being pretty completely renovated and will be ready for us in fall. We have the Woods, which is also getting some renovation work done with the Fund for GMS work we did last fall. We have the athletic fields, we have downhill, we have the upper school garden. Think about the uphill playground also. We have all these great spaces that we have the ability to be outside learning and playing and spread out. So that's a big advantage we have. A fourth advantage we have is your board of trustees. So our board of trustees, I told you what their three roles are, and they do that so well. They dip down into operational level when I need their help, and they support the school in that way. But they don't wallow or they don't get into the weeds of the work at the operational level, because that's not their job. They support exactly the way they're supposed to, and it's so helpful. Many of my head of school friends have trouble with their board, that my board's trying to do this, or my board says that this teacher should do this, or my board says the curriculum should be this. And that's not the board's job. That's our curriculum teams, that's our administrative team's job. And the board's job is to really empower us with those three jobs. Them doing their job well helps set the school up for success. A fifth advantage we have is you. I've been blown away with some of the stories that I've heard from our families during this time, with some of the things we've done. For one example, everyone knows that we made a business decision to furlough some of the toddler and CASA faculty. And the toddler parents, we had in-depth conversations with them, so they knew exactly what was going on. Whereas the rest of the community, I just kind of shared it at a brief level because it didn't affect the rest of the school as directly. Once I put that announcement out, I had no less than 10 calls, probably within that day, from parents, many of whom were not even toddler parents, checking in, saying, can I start a fund? Do those teachers need some help? I'm worried about them. Can I donate to a cause so they can be paid? And these were parents who weren't even with children and toddlers. Once I was able to explain to them that part of the reason we were comfortable furloughing them is that with the CARES Act enhanced unemployment benefits, that those furloughed faculty were still on our payroll. Technically, we're still paying their benefits if they receive benefits from us, and they were not coming to financial harm, that they were doing just fine financially. That put the people at ease who called me, but the fact that they reached out to call me, that everyone's under strain during this time, financial and emotional and otherwise. And people reached out to say, what can I do? At the end of one of my head of schools the other morning, we got pretty deep into some business decisions and questions and things like that. And one of our parents ended the session saying, Kevin, you've been talking about what the faculty are doing for our kids, what the administrative team is doing for our families, what the board is doing for the school. They ended the question by saying, what can we do for you? I was caught off guard for a couple questions during the head of school huddles, but that one caught me off guard. Like during all this time, and this family has 3 children, 2 of whom are at our school, and we hope one will join us soon. That was their question, saying, what can we do for you? And that spirit, that idea, that partnership, that community, that gives me a lot of faith in our school. So it's a huge advantage we have. Other schools, I think parents have a little bit higher sense of entitlement, that I paid a tuition, I should be getting this. I don't care what happens to the teacher. I don't care if you don't build that. Me. That's not the way our community operates. That's not the way we feel. If someone needs help, we're going to jump in and help them. If the school needs help, people have been jumping in to help. It's a big advantage we have. The sixth advantage I wanted to add, also one of our guiding principles, is Montessori values and pedagogy. That you can imagine our children are inspired and driven to be independent learners, curious learners, independently motivated or intrinsically motivated. And I don't know if I'll say surprisingly, or maybe ironically, but the amount of success that a school that's based on hands-on, multi-age, observational, individualized curriculum program, the amount of success we found in remote learning was really, really impressive. So that Montessori values and pedagogy is one of our advantages. The next section we talked about is what we are planning. We talked about that the school is going through what we call scenario-based planning. These scenarios aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but they're the three scenarios towards which we're planning. They are ranked in order. So here's an overview of what they are. Plan A is that in the middle of August, we open up in-person learning, ready to welcome all the students back. That is towards what we are working. That is what, barring some major thing that's out of our control. So if we progress, instead of from phase 2 to phase 3, if the state of North Carolina progresses backwards to phase 1 or backwards to a stay-at-home order, that's out of our control. We can't manage that. But barring anything like that, Plan A, in-person learning for the entire school, is what we're doing. And we'll talk later on about which guidelines from the CDC and the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services we're following and how, so that we can assure that we're opening as safely and feasibly as we can. If you look at the screen, there's this little parenthetical reference, concurrent remote learning as needed. What does that mean? It is our plan. We're going to put out a survey at the end of the year, which I hope is coming out this weekend. And we need you to fill this survey out. It's about planning for next year. And part of the survey is about remote learning reflection, what worked, what didn't work. And in that survey, we plan on looking at that survey, thinking about what we've already heard, thinking about what we know we need to improve. And then this summer, we're gonna refine, improve, repackage our whole remote learning program so that it's done, ready to go, sitting on the shelf. Because when we come back in the fall, our teacher, our staff, our energy needs to be fully focused on our students in front of us for in-person learning. And I need to have the remote learning plan packaged, ready to go, sitting on the shelf. There's 3 reasons that we're imagining we'll need remote learning next year. One is this Plan C, that if something just comes so far out of our control that we can't stay in-person learning safely and we have to go to remote learning, I want remote learning sitting there on the shelf, ready to go. So it's gonna be laid out for the whole year. It'll be kind of active in the background, ready to go. Mm-hmm. The second thing that we might need it for is when COVID-19 starts to spread more, which is what all the modeling and all of the CDC and our parent physician advisors, that we're going to see some sort of spike in August, September, November, December, that when that spike's coming, there'll be more cases within Greensboro. There might be cases within Greensboro Montessori School. And we'll be setting guidelines followed by CDC, or we'll be following CDC guidelines and the Division of Health and Human Services of North Carolina. If, for example, there's a direct exposure to a confirmed case, it might be that the time that someone has to be away from school is 2 weeks, it's 14 days, or maybe it's 10 days. We'll get all those procedures clearly written down so you can see them. We don't have them yet. But if that student has to go home for 2 weeks, I don't want the teachers to say, well, what do we send home? They're gone for 2 weeks. And maybe they're feeling totally fine at home, but they're not feeling sick. But our policies still say they have to be home for 2 weeks. I want them to be able to jump right into remote learning, that they're ready to go. For different age children, that means different things. For our older children, well, they might just be jumping on their Google Hangout classrooms and beaming into the classroom. So Doug in junior high is teaching a math lesson to his 5 children on some sort of geometric concept. And then one student who's at home, they flip on their computer, Doug flips on his computer, and then we kind of virtually put a laptop or an iPad right at that table, and then they're there. For younger children, it might look different, where we send home some activities and we might dedicate one person on our team who's going to be anyone who's at home during that time, their point of contact. That's a second reason we might need remote learning. A third reason is some of our families have started to express that they may choose to stay home for a couple months next fall, that they want to fully enroll and they want to stay part of the community, but they would prefer, for whatever reason, be it medical, be it personal preference, be there's an at-risk health situation within the family, that they might stay remote learning at home. And we want to make sure that that's a third reason that remote learning might be running concurrently. And each of those three examples of remote learning will look a little bit differently, but we think they're all three of them very important things for us. So that's why under Plan A, there will be a remote learning option going the whole year. Plan C, and I know I skipped Plan B, but Plan C is if none of it works. That if we just can't, everything that I'll be talking about for the next 20 minutes that's going to help us stay in person safely, if that all just cannot work, that if the virus becomes so big or so widespread, Plan C is we have to go to remote learning. We don't want that. It's not good for us. It's not good for, no matter how proud I am of what we did, it is not what we want. Plan B is an interesting in-between option for some of our families that we've been exploring. We are not yet ready to say that this is definitely an option that's available to us. I hope to be closer to saying that in the coming days and weeks. We're actively researching this. Here's the general idea of Plan B, that I think everyone's aware that there's kind of an inverse relationship of the effectiveness of remote learning and the age of our children. Our junior high kids, they haven't missed a beat. Their classes are just as robust, just as rigorous. Their projects are just as exciting. It's been hard and sad not being together, and really hard not being at our land campus where our oldest students go every 6 or 7 weeks and they spend a week there. Our upper L kids are also just doing fantastic work. Lower L is kind of right on that cusp, but they did great work. And we have some improvements that we're going to make on our end to make it better. Once you get down to primary and toddler, while we've been sharing amazing things and you all have been doing amazing work, the effectiveness, for example, of a toddler in remote learning just isn't as high. It still requires a parent to be there, or a nanny or a child caregiver, someone to be there, with the child. And when we look at the demographics of our school, a lot of our younger children's families have when there's two parents in the household, that both parents might be working. And for all of us that tried to work with a 2, 3, 4, or 5-year-old at home in these last 2 months, it's not easy. And we've also probably all heard of various daycare centers that have stayed open during COVID-19. That's something we're exploring, is what would it look like for us to keep our toddler and part of our primary program, our preschool part of it, open. So one avenue through which those daycare centers that stayed open were able to stay open is because they were licensed daycares. Our school is not a licensed daycare. A daycare center, we were 6 years ago, and the North Carolina law changed that allowed us to have our accrediting bodies of AMS and SAIS supersede their guidelines. And we are happy to not have those daycare center guidelines. It's nothing that made us less safe or clean. We didn't change any of those. We met those policies all along. But for example, they would not allow 18-month-year-olds to be with 3-year-olds. That doesn't work the best for a Montessori school. So, but we think there's another path that's available to us to keep our toddler and primary programs open. And we believe that if we can follow, for example, A, B, and C guidelines of the CDC for COVID-19 emergency measures for early childhood centers, if we can follow those guidelines safely and with fidelity, and the Division of Health and Human Services North Carolina guidelines for keeping early childhood center open during COVID-19, if we can follow A, B, C, and D of their guidelines with confidence and fidelity, that we believe that we are still able to stay open. The reason I say we believe is we're getting slightly mixed answers from the state, from our accrediting bodies, from our attorneys, of who certifies that, of who can say, yes, you can stay open. But we're working really hard for that because we know for our youngest families, it's that much, I don't want to say it comparatively, but I think it's that much more important to those families. It's really hard for those families to function when the youngest students are at home. So that's Plan B. Plan C I already mentioned, and those are the scenarios through which we're planning. Here's 5 things that I want to share that you can expect for next year at a high level. The first thing you can expect is our mission. That similar to what I said about a Montessori values, we're not going to stop being a Montessori school. We know that's why you chose our school. That's critically important to us. Our mission is this idea of both nurturing and challenging all of our students so that they can develop the skills, which is their academic, critical thinking, collaborative thinking, their skills and their courage, which is their perseverance, their independence, their character, um, to be the best people they can be, which we call to unleash their full potential. So that mission is still near and dear to us. That's not going away. Second thing you can expect is the 2020-21 tuition that the Board of Trustees set during the re-enrollment process. That is what the tuition will remain throughout next year. Regardless of whether we're in plans A, B, or C, that tuition is being set. It supports our operations, which over 80% of which is paying our employees. We made I'll say difficult decision, but in one way it wasn't a difficult decision. All of our employees are still getting the same raises that I wanted to give them before this struck. A lot of them working as hard and if not harder than they typically work. And so I'm not able or willing to reduce on those compensation pieces. And so our strategy will remain the same, that for families who are experiencing financial hardship temporarily due to COVID-19 and if it threatens their enrollment, we're working with them using a various set of tactics that we need to help those families individually so that they can continue to stay with us. And if that applies to your family, as I've done in every single email I've written, please reach out to us. The families that have reached out to us, we've had a high level of success in being able to support those families one way or the other. Summer camp. For those of you that have applied to summer camp, first of all, it's full. It filled up right away, so we're not taking new enrollments for summer camp. So if something changed in your world and you think you now need summer camp care, we're not able to take new applications. But for those of you that have been enrolled, we shared with you that we were not able to open in June. We are working towards opening in July. I'm hoping that, or not I'm hoping, I have to make that decision by the end of next week, that the week at the end of school, so that we can let our parents and our team plan for it. But we're working towards doing our best to be ready to open in person in July. The fourth bullet point that you can be ready for and what you can expect, and I maybe should have put this right at top underneath our mission, but disruption and change. You're still coming back to a Montessori school. You're still coming back to an incredibly rich and warm learning environment, but there's going to be disruption. There's going to be change. We know that. And then the fifth thing you can expect is that we will be following the CDC guidelines and the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Service guidelines as we reopen our school. This is just one of the, I don't think I exaggerate, over hundreds of sets of flow charts, webinars, guidelines, restrictions, rules, regulations, interpretation, legal memos, white papers that have been produced from our organizations of independent schools, from the CDC, from the state. The ones that we think are easiest for us to communicate about and have been shaping our way of thinking and organizing our thinking is what the North Carolina Division of Health and Human Services, influenced by the CDC, has put out. Now, these are pre-decisional strategies, so they have not said these are definitely what they are, but everything that we're currently working towards and what we're reading with the CDC, what our medical advisors are telling us, fits pretty cleanly into these 4 approaches. So I'm going to talk about each one of these 4 approaches to share what we know. It's not a perfected or finalized plan yet, but it's where we're headed. It's what we're working towards. And I kid you not, every single day something changes, and every single day we're getting a little bit closer to clarity. That's a word that we use on our team sometimes, is we try to wade through everything so that we can see something clearly. Sometimes it takes longer than others, But once we really look at that, think about that, take that perspective, talk to this person, once it becomes clear, that's when we know it's time to start acting on that. We're getting closer and closer to clarity on our plans. So approach one, increase social distancing. You can see 3 bullet points under there, space modifications, density reduction actions, and minimizing opportunities for sustained exposure. This approach one probably encompasses a large percentage of our most important strategies and some things that might feel and look a little different when you come back to campus that we feel if we put these in place, it increases our chances the best to slow the spread of the virus, to stay true to our Montessori values, and to stay in-person learning. So structural and physical space modifications. There'll be a lot more hand sanitizers all over campus. We might be building a couple new sinks for washing hands. There might be there will be a sneeze guard or a plexiglass guard in front of the front office desk when you come to see Andy or Young Do. We're gonna try to make it look not too institutionalized and not feel like a prison. And those are some things that we're gonna have to do. There'll be some other minor construction or additions to the building. Not additions to the building, additions to classrooms that I'll talk about in a minute. But those are some physical space modifications that are coming our way. Density limiting actions. This is probably our single, I guess, biggest or most important strategy or tactic that we're putting into place. What this is gonna look like is we are gonna operate next year in smaller learning classrooms. Where right now I'm kind of calling them pods. I don't know if we'll keep calling them that or not, but the idea of our pods that I'll mention lower L as a starting point. Right now we're projecting an enrollment of 60 children for lower L. We're at full capacity. And if one person in those 60 children, even though we have 2 different classrooms of 30 children and we have those 5 trained great teachers running those programs, if one person has a COVID-19, whether they're asymptomatic or symptomatic, there's a good chance that all 60 of those children have been exposed. They ate lunch with upper L in the same space. We sprayed on the tables in between, but there's still a chance that that person's exposed a lot of other people. They all go to the art room for classes, so there's a good chance that that person would have exposed a lot of people. They do singing on the stage, the same place primary does it, the same place junior high ensemble does it. There's a good chances that germs could have been shared. So what we're gonna do is instead of operating with 60 people in lower L, we're gonna break those down into probably 4 pods. So it could be that there's 4 pods of 15 people. And an advantage of those pods is that there'll be these very intimate learning groups. That the teacher who's running those will know those children as well as we ever have, which is so important to our Montessori values, that they'll be driven by observation and individualizing the curriculum and staying true to our Montessori values. And I spoke earlier about the depth of our bench, how important that is, that our people are so skilled and trained so well, or that Leticia and Ben and Ashby are starting the training this summer, and that myself and Gail and Stacy are finishing them. That allows us to make some of these movements to have these smaller pods. Now, the smaller pods will operate independently throughout the day. And that's the sad part of this, that imagine my daughter, Annabelle, one of her best friends is Isabella. They might not be in the same pod. And that's a sad reality, that they're not gonna see each other, because those pods, we're not gonna get together at recess and have all the pods together, because that would undo all the benefits of keeping those groups separated. When they go to CASA, we're not gonna merge together a bunch of pods. CASA is gonna come to that pod. So let's say that Amber is one of the lower L CASA people, and let's say that Christy is running pod A in the lower L group, and that my daughter Annabelle, who's in pod A with Christy, that if that group is going to be a CASA pod, and so they won't really dismiss at 3 o'clock. There's no need to. They're going to stay in that space, and maybe Amber, instead of coming in at 3, maybe she comes in at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock, and maybe Christy and she form this little teammate that maybe Christy will take a break for an hour and go meet with Mary and Khaki and Christy and Katie and Cynthia. and then Amber will do an activity. Then maybe Christy will come back to the classroom and she'll close out with Amber. And then maybe Christy leaves at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Miss Mary Jacobson, maybe she'll leave at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. For those of you who don't know Mary, that all of our teachers are exceptionally dedicated. Mary digs in pretty hard for her love of her children and her students. But those pods, if and when someone gets sick, that pod is where those germs were. We'll still be using social distancing and safety within those pods that I'll talk about in a minute. But then the potential is, the theory is, that we don't have to shut down the whole school for a day or 2 days or 3 days. We shut down that pod. And that protects the isolation of that just, I mean, you can think about that, just that it's 15 children who are potentially exposed instead of 60, or instead of 120, or instead of 250. So this is one of our biggest strategies of working in these pods. Our commitment to cultural education is just as high. And maybe one group will go to the art room every morning for a week, that they'll do an intensive with Catherine, so that there's not 5 different classes coming and going in the art room. Or maybe Betsy will come to the classroom. She'll probably be doing drumming work and instrument work instead of singing, because singing is another way that this virus can be transmitted. Or maybe Chelsea and Sarah will, kind of like Betsy, do an intensive where they'll be in one pod, or maybe 3 pods for 2 hours a day or a couple days a week. And then they'll rotate through. They'll do 3 weeks with one pod, then another, then another. We don't know exactly how that's going to look yet, but we're still going to have our cultural educators. That's so important, but they won't be spreading around as much. And as they go from a pod to a pod to a pod, I don't want them going to every single pod, because they could be carrying some germs potentially, but they'll act just like your doctors do whenever you go to a doctor's office. Like the doctor, when they leave an office, they scrub out. And then when they enter to see another patient, they scrub in. And so our people are doing the same thing, that they're cultural ed. So these smaller groups, and we'll work to find ways to keep them connected. This was another suggestion that came from our head of school huddles, that let's say there's 4 lower L pods. How great if we can find some fun ways to keep them connected. Maybe there's a letter writing campaign of how can pod 3 say something to pod 4, to pod 2, to 1, or maybe you do those chain letters, or maybe they write a story back and forth. One parent had an idea that I thought was pretty creative, that what if there's 2 good friends and they're not in the same pod? Could one of the workstations in the classroom be an iPad that's set up with FaceTime and a direct feed to an iPad in the other pod? Or if they just want to talk to their friend, they can go in there, put on headphones, and say hello. So those are some pretty interesting possibilities. The minimizing opportunities for sustained exposure. We're not going to be doing assemblies anymore for a while. We won't be eating lunch as a whole group for a while. Those just aren't things that are safe. While they're really important to our community, we can still stay true to our Montessori values without those. We'll also probably be limiting exposure of adults to the building, which is something that's been a standard practice recommended by CDC and divisions of Health and Human Services. That's something we'll be looking at also. Approach 2. We'll be cleaning as we always do, and we'll be doing it at a more intense level. 2 specific things that are with our contract with our cleaning company, we've already added personnel just to increase or augment or beef up the amount of cleaning power that they have when they work from, they're typically, I think, 5 to midnight is their shift. And so they'll be doing even more disinfecting and more work with high touch areas. The other thing that we're exploring and that we think is very important is to figure out how we can clean the spaces during the day. That is it that we invest in some spray equipment that has been recommended to us, or that when there's a schedule that pods A and B go out to recess, and we know they're out at recess from 11 to 12. So someone from the cleaning team or the facilities team comes in and says, all right, we're doing we have a 15-minute protocol where we clean a room, and it gets done in between while the group's outside. So trying to have a second cleaning during the day is something that's pretty important to us. The second thing, implement systematic hygiene routines. Fortunately, our community is really good at that right now, but we're going to spend even more energy on that. Washing our hands to make sure that that birthday song is sang, to make sure that we are washing at the appropriate times, that there might be more hand sanitizer stations throughout the building, to make sure that we're giving space, that we're giving physical opportunity, and that it's part of the curriculum, the expectations, the culture of when we wash and how we wash. Cloth face coverings. These are a big topic for people. It makes me a little bit sad that it's become politicized, whether masks are important or not. One of the things I value a lot about our community is that we have a lot of different types of family, from ethnic, racial, political, financial, gender, sexual orientation, nuclear, physical family structure of how the structures of the family are. We have a lot of different types of family. And so even within those families, there's a deep respect for differences, types of opinions. So I imagine our community, with following CDC and DHHS guidelines, will take the same approach, that we're going to be respectful of what the school asks of us, and we'll be respectful of people's different opinions, and it's not going to be a challenge for us. So masks in general, that we all know what they're intended for, and they're not just for your child's protection, that they're also for our team's protection. And I need those germs to not be spread to our faculty staff as well. And we also know that the idea of a 2-year-old wearing a mask just isn't very feasible. The idea of not hugging a toddler when they fall down and cry is not very feasible. And so the level at which we'll put face masks or face shields or neck gaiters. One of our friends runs a camp, Camp Weaver, who's one of our parents who's on our board. And they've had a great deal of success with kind of those elementary age children, that their masks are these gaiters, that they're not like winter warm gaiters like fleece or cotton or wool. There's this thinner nylon, and they got their doctors to sign off on them that they were thick enough that they were serving the medical needs of a mask. And so the kids kind of wore them as part of their identity, that they were down around their neck when they were in their pod or outside, not close to anybody. And then if they'd come to a meeting or come to a building, a fort in close proximity, they'd mask up. They'd slide their mask up. And being elementary kids, they'd of course put them over their face to be silly, and there'd be problems with that. Or they'd wear them up high on their heads, or they'd wear them as bandanas, or they'd swing around their hands. Then they'd go home, get washed, come back the next day. We'd have spare masks around. But every single child who wears a mask is going to decrease the risk of exposure and decrease the risk of transmission spread. So the idea that if we have 12 children in a pod, every child that wears a mask or a face shield within that pod increases our risk management. We know that there's a chance for primary and even lower L that they're not going to be wearing masks all day long. The older the child is, the more success we'll have with that, and the more we can expect that. But imagine a child who has sensory issues, that there's just absolutely no way they could function with something around their face. I don't want to exclude them from campus. I want to work with them to see what we can figure out, what a in-between point is. Maybe the primary children are given lessons in masks, and maybe they have a personal little workstation where they hang them. And when they come to a lesson, maybe we try to get them to put them on. And maybe we have a certain level of success. We're going to work towards that. But also, like for the teachers, maybe they might wear shields instead of masks, because I need the younger children to see the teacher's mouths for how do you articulate a T sound, touch the tongue to your top of your mouth, or smile. They need to register those social cues. So we're going to find the best balance. And a lot of our doctors have said also, Kevin, apply some common sense. And they also said, don't forget, doing these pods is one of the biggest and most important strategies you can put in place. So it's not that within the pod, we're going to say, we can do anything. We're a quarantine family. The doctors have been very clear that that's not the right approach. But they've also been very clear that anything you can do within those pods to help is a good thing. Approach 3 is monitoring. We're probably going to have, well, not probably, we're going to have families do some sort of check-in screening every single day. I presume a lot of us have been to the doctor's office in the last 2 months, where before you step up to the window, they say, stop here. And they say, are you feveric? Have you been exposed to COVID-19? Do you suspect you have it? Are you short of breath? Do you have chest pains? Have you traveled to X, Y, or Z? And if you say no, 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 then they say, all right, come on in. We're probably gonna do some sort of similar thing to that. I don't think we'll be taking children's temperatures. I think we might be asking you to take children's temperatures, maybe on a daily basis. And so it might look like either us out at Carline with clipboards that, okay, the Navarro family's here. Jess, are all three of your children this, 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 and this, and this? Come on in. We're also exploring if we can develop a software package for that. For a lot of our medical professionals in the community, they have an app that before they check into work, their shift at 6 a.m., they get a text message from the hospital that says, do you have a sore throat? Do you have a fever? Have you been exposed? Is anyone in your family? Do you think? No, check, check, check. It takes about a minute, then they check, then they're done. I would love it if we could accomplish something like that. That way at Carline, it's us out there with an iPad saying, all right, everybody's done it. Come on in, come on in. Oh, looks like the Navarro family forgot to do theirs. Jess, have you boom, boom, boom? All right, we got you. Come on in. We'll do that for our employees also. That's just because that's one of the ways that CDC, DHHS is recommending that we help keep our building clean and healthy. What else is on here? Sending folks home. That we'll have very clear procedures on what this is. You will get them before the beginning of the year. I'm probably gonna need to ask you to sign off on them, and we'll definitely have a head of school huddle to discuss them as well. But imagine right now our policy is if you get a fever, you're home for 24 hours until you're fever free without pain reduction medicine. I think that's going to shift to a longer period of time. I think it might be 3 days. If it's COVID-19 exposure, I think it's even more. Once we get those exposures, times for people to be home, I'll need us all to agree on that and implement those procedures with a high level of fidelity, including our team. And so that's one of the reasons that that remote learning program needs to be up and going. That's one of the reasons on what to expect is disruption. We know disruption. I know if I send a child home for 2 weeks, that is going to be hard on the family. I know that. And I know that it's what's being recommended and required by CDC and Division of Health and Human Services so that we can be safe and stay in-person learning. We're also gonna be looking through how it is that we support our students, our team during this highly stressful time. You know that we hired a counselor during the past 2 months to support this, our community during this. I don't know if we're gonna be able to continue that next year or not. It's on our long-range plan to hire a counselor, but with some of the cost and the operational financial stress of the situation, I'm not sure if adding a position is going to be feasible for us this year. But we still want to be very intentional in how we support our community, our students, our at-risk populations in healthy and responsible ways. So stay tuned for that because I might be asking for some parent help from that. Maybe we form under the GMSCA some sort of group supported to that. We look into the community. Who are our parents who are counselors, pastoral workers, social workers that can you help us? Can I get a couple parents to join that group, a couple faculty to join that group, a couple administrators to join that group so that we're ready to be both responsive and proactive. Like what can we do to be ready for that? Fourth approach is providing education. So these head of school huddles are part of that, and we'll be doing more of them. There'll be signs up at the doors. They might not be our beautifully GMS branded signs. They might say Division of North Carolina, Health and Human Services. Do not enter this building if X, Y, and Z. So we'll continue to provide as much information as we can and education. There'll also be additional training for our faculty and staff over the summer to make sure they're feeling prepared with additional procedures. So those 4 guidelines, those approaches are kind of where all of our specific strategies are being nested. Our goal is by the last week of school or very shortly thereafter is to send more updated information about this. And then the specific procedures will be coming out over the summer so that you know, and you can prepare your child for what's gonna be there. One of the parents asked, is it gonna look dramatically different when they come back? I think it's gonna be dramatically different, but I don't think it's gonna feel dramatically different. And what I mean by that, we're gonna settle into the fact, I think wearing masks, people are gonna get comfortable with. I've heard a lot of stories from our family saying, oh, our 4-year-old can totally do it. They have it in their pocket, they pull it out when we go in the store, they know how to do it. and they're still gonna be in a warm, nurturing environment. We like bigger class sizes in Montessori. We really do. It's a curious thing about Montessorians. We like bigger classes because the older children can support the younger children, that they are independent as they work. It works well for us. And so these smaller class sizes are a temporary measure for us. But a side benefit of that is they're going to be this really tight group. And so I think it's still going to feel like a warm, loving environment. The classrooms, there'll be a couple fewer children in it. There'll be a couple shelves removed because we'll be moving some classrooms and shelves and pods around different rooms on campus. They might have a different entrance into the building. Car line might look a little bit different. We'll try to make that as smooth as possible. CASA is going to feel a little different. Lunch is going to feel a little different. Kids are pretty resilient. I think it's going to be such a big win for us to get them back to seeing some of their friends. It's going to be such a big win for us, for our teachers to be able to sit down and do a lesson. It's going to be such a big win for us to be in these pods where we have a higher level of confidence and security that we're doing our best to limit the spread of these germs and to manage it when the germs are spread. So those are the 4 approaches we're looking at. I also want to say that with remote learning, I talked about that we're going to reflect on what improvements we need to make. There's some that we already know about. Like, for example, assessment and accountability for students, especially in the middle grades, we struggled with. It's hard. Montessorians, the way we assess is we sit there with our notebooks and we watch. Okay, I see Mahinda. I'm less like, is Mahinda holding that noodle correctly? Okay, he is. Wait, no, he's not. Okay, wait. And we might give a lesson or give a suggestion or then move him on to the other lesson or to progress him in another skill. And we make our notes on what they do. That's how we do our assessment. It was hard for us to assess remotely. We have some ideas on how we can improve it, but that's something we know we need to improve. Another thing, for example, that we know we need to improve is the structure or within some of the divisions. Like, for example, lower L, we really focused our energy on providing a tremendous amount of rich resources and lessons and videos. We did that. We did a great job on that. And I think we missed the mark a little bit, where it might have worked just as well to send fewer resources, but with a more clear structure, that every single day you have a 9 a.m. live lesson. You check in, there's a teacher, you're working. It might be the child's doing their work, but the khaki's on the call. She's like, all right, Annabelle, don't forget to do that. Show me your work. Let me see it. Okay, I got it. And then maybe there's a second one every other day. Like, every day there's one lesson, and every other day there's a second one at 1 o'clock. That it's a check-in or reporting of the piece, or maybe math is in the afternoon. Again, we focus our energy on really both teachers just listening and talking to the children, trying to support them. But we heard pretty loud and clear from our families that while they appreciated that, they really need a little more consistency. And I shared with all those parents, and I'll share with you, we're not going to put our elementary children on a screen from 8 to 3 p.m. That is not what we're going to do. And we need to add some more time where there's some more structure. So those are some improvements that we know we need to make and we want to make. Or increase live lessons from cultural educators. That we added Spanish into lower L in the last 4 or 5 weeks and music into primary. Those worked great. A lot of our families really enjoyed that. And those 2 things in particular work well for remote learning. That especially the singing. If you're in your own home, singing isn't a danger, and you can sing together online. And same with Spanish. Like, speaking Spanish is so important. All of our Spanish teachers will tell you that. So those are some of the things we'll be working towards to make sure we're improving our remote learning. So that is where we stopped there. And during each of the head of school huddles, we probably talked for 20 or 30 minutes. I budgeted an hour and a half for each of the huddles. They all went closer to 2 hours because the conversation was just really flowing. I sensed in all the questions curiosity on what we're doing, worry on what we're doing, a lot of appreciation for what the faculty and staff are doing. I wish we would have had time to share these details earlier or even had the details, but that's been the theme of how I've been feeling the parents respond. It's also provoked some questions that we've had some one-off questions. And for this group who's watching this, that we don't have the option to dialogue as a group right now. And so it might be that you need to give me a shout or give Nancy or Ben a shout or check in with something of a question you have from this, or give Ria a shout if you're one of our new families that you can say, what does that mean for me? That I am a junior high family. I want to go into ninth grade. Is that still an option? Yeah, that's an option. I'm a toddler family. I'm starting for the first year. What does that mean if you did this? Well, let's talk to you about that. And so Ria, Nancy, Ben, and I are all available to you, and we're good places to start for conversation points. We closed the session with showing just this little 5-minute video that we just put together last weekend. It really celebrates what our faculty and staff and our parents and our students have done. And the way I closed out most of the huddles was I asked the question, I said, how are we going to do this? I was like, that. And when you watch the video, hopefully you'll agree that it'll only reinvigorate your strength of commitment to this community. That we're going to be there for you in the fall. The last line of the video is, what did it say? It had one of our primary students doing the hand over hand monkey bars on uphill playground. I think it said, so no matter what, we're going to be here for you in the fall. For now, oh, I think we said, no children have fallen behind academically. As Montessorians, we are ready to meet them where they are. But for now, celebrate your child, pay close attention to their emotional and mental health, and know that we are going to be there for you in the fall. Because whatever happens, our Montessori students are ready to learn any and everywhere. And because of our parents, because of our students, because of our faculty staff, I have a high level of faith in our success for next year. Thanks for taking some time to watch this. If you haven't done so already, we'd really like you to fill out the survey just so we can hear as many voices as possible to help us plan for fall, when we are going to open in person and do everything we can to stay in person as long as we can, and to be as safe and logistically as we can safely and logistically feasibly do. We're going to have a great year. Thanks for tuning in. I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.